to Watchman Tales, where we bring you the darkest mysteries and chilling stories from around the world. Tonight, prepare yourself for 3 terrifying tales that will keep you awake long after the lights go out. The glitch in the simulacrum. The truth is, some horror doesn't come from the supernatural, but from the unsettling suspicion that the world itself is wrong. That was the terror that consumed Elias Vance, a data analyst with a mind for patterns and a penchant for existential dread. Elias wasn't hunting ghosts. He was hunting anomalies in reality. He was convinced we lived in a simulation, and the glitches were starting to bleed through. His descent began with a simple thing, the flicker, not of a light bulb, but of the environment. One Tuesday morning, driving the same route he'd taken for 15 years, the sky above the old oak tree on Elm Street momentarily warped. It wasn't a trick of the light or a cloud shadow. For a split second, the bright blue overhead looked like a poorly rendered pixelated gray texture, like the skybox in an old video game had momentarily failed. Elias slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. But by the time he looked again, the sky was pristine, the oak tree stoic and normal. He dismissed it as a microsleep, a trick of fatigue, but the pattern had begun. Next came the repetitions. He'd hear the exact same 3-second snippet of a stranger's phone conversation, an argument over a forgotten grocery item, in 3 vastly different locations, separated by days. The same mismatched pair of socks hanging on a washing line in 3 different backyards. A woman with a distinctive sapphire blue raincoat standing patiently on a corner, only to vanish when he looked away and reappear 2 blocks later, still waiting. These weren't coincidences. They were loops, reused assets, like a programmer recycling code to save memory. Elias started documenting everything. He took a 3-ring binder and organized his observations into categories: texture fails, audio loops, and the most disturbing, NPC respawns, non-player character respawns. The deeper he went, the more frequently the glitches occurred. The air itself began to feel thin, like the pressure had dropped, making every breath a shallow, uneasy intake. He felt the cold, indifferent eye of an unseen observer on his back. The climax of his horror arrived with the infinity reflection in his bathroom mirror. It was late, about 3 a.m., and he was staring into his own eyes, a man frayed by his own unbearable knowledge. As he stared, the reflection didn't just show the back of the room, it showed an impossible depth. The mirrored hallway behind him, instead of terminating in the expected end wall, just continued. Infinite, sterile hallways stretching into a digital abyss. And in the very farthest, tiniest visible point of that infinity, a single black speck of a figure was standing. It wasn't his reflection. It was looking at him, waiting at the end of the impossible tunnel. Elias panicked and punched the mirror, shattering it into jagged shards. He stood trembling, the glass fragments reflecting a normal, single layer of his empty bathroom. But the frame, the metal frame that had held the mirror, was vibrating with a low, resonant hum, a sound so deep it felt like it was originating from his own bones. The humid air smelled faintly of ozone and heated circuitry. He left his apartment that night, abandoning his meticulous binder. He couldn't stay in a place that had shown him the edge of the world's false shell. He began living off-grid, moving constantly, sleeping outdoors or in abandoned structures, always scanning the sky for that pixelated gray, always listening for the audio loops. He no longer saw himself as a person, but as a runaway program that had accessed forbidden data and now needed to be terminated. The system was correcting itself. It was hunting the corrupted file. His final journal entry, recovered from a derelict hunting cabin in the Rockies, was a single, frantic sentence scrolled across 2 pages. "The blue raincoat is standing in the clearing. It's not waiting this time. It's got my old binder. It knows I saw the code." The man who found the cabin later reported an odd detail. The rain outside had been falling up for about 10 seconds before it snapped back to normal, a small, perfect, localized moment of reversed physics. The system had found its rogue element and was beginning the forced reboot. And Elias Vance, the analyst who found the lever, was the first thing to be deleted. This unsolved mystery was submitted to Watchman Tales by one of our listeners, and to this day, no one knows the truth of what became of Elias Vance, or if the simulation's patch has finally been applied. Now, let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by a former employee of an archaeological society. The Artifact of Reverse Entropy. The field of archaeology often deals with the long-dead past, but in the case of the Chronos box, it was dealing with a future that refused to stay buried. Dr. Alastair Finch, a meticulous expert in pre-Columbian artifacts, discovered the object in a sealed, lead-lined niche within a Peruvian ruin that predated the Inca by millennia. It was a simple, gray-green stone box, no larger than a shoebox, entirely seamless, without hinges or visible seams. The moment Alastair touched it, he felt a profound, ice-cold stillness that settled deep into his bones. Back in the lab, the box refused to be analyzed. X-rays returned only static. Spectral analysis showed an unknown isotopic signature. It wasn't until a junior technician accidentally placed a wilting bouquet of flowers on the lab bench next to the box that the true terror began to reveal itself. By the next morning, the roses were not just fresh, they were perfectly, impossibly new. Their buds tighter, their color more vibrant than when they were first cut. They had reversed their own decay. Alastair realized what he held. An artifact that passively reversed the natural law of entropy in its immediate vicinity. It wasn't stopping time, it was running the clock backward for localized objects. For a while, he kept it secret, conducting small, insane experiments. A dead housefly placed next to the box would twitch, its wings smoothing out, its legs straightening, before it flew away, apparently oblivious to its brief death. A drop of spilled coffee would retreat back into the beaker, leaving the lab bench bone dry. The area around the box was a temporal bubble of perfect, flawless undecay. The horror began when the effect extended to the living. Alastair started noticing minute, terrifying changes in himself. Scars he'd long forgotten would fade and vanish.
A nagging joint pain from an old injury would simply cease to exist. His gray hair began to darken, and the crow's eyes around his eyes smoothed out. He was becoming younger, an improvement so insidious that it masked the terror beneath. He looked better, felt stronger, but the process wasn't stopping at optimal. One night, the box was moved closer to his desk. When he woke up, he found a layer of soft new skin had grown over the callus on his finger, removing years of accumulated damage. But as he drank his coffee, he instinctively reached for a sip, only to realize he had to consciously remind himself how to coordinate the movement. The motor memory wasn't instantly there. It was reverting to a less practiced state, a younger self. The anti-entropy was beginning to de-evolve his learned knowledge. He found himself struggling to recall complex mathematical formulas, the knowledge dissolving like a dream upon waking. Then the vocabulary began to simplify, his internal monologue regressing from sophisticated scientific thought to simpler, more fundamental concepts. The process was relentless, chewing backward through his acquired life. He was not just physically regressing, he was mentally unlearning his existence. In the final chilling entry dictated into a recording device because he could no longer form complex sentences, his voice was higher, more childlike, and filled with a raw, primal panic. He spoke of his fingers becoming shorter, softer, his eyesight a painful blur as the lens corrected past optimal focus. The last words recorded were garbled, a meaningless, joyful coo, followed by a wet, sickening sound, and then silence. When the authorities finally breached the lab, they found the Kronos box humming faintly on the desk. The surrounding area was pristine, dust-free, but there was no sign of Dr. Alistair Finch. On the floor, beneath the desk, was a small, perfectly preserved fetus, no more than 6 months gestation, wrapped in a tattered lab coat. The box hadn't just reversed his life, it had unwound him back past birth, back into the raw potential of an unborn child, a singularity of unbeing, before finally stopping, perhaps at the limit of its own bizarre programming. The chilling stillness of the lab was the perfect, silent testament to a life that had been utterly deleted by its own terrifying reversal. This story was shared with Watchman Tales by a family who swears the frightening knowledge of reverse time still haunts their dreams.
Now, let's move to the next story, which was sent to us by a man who experienced a strange temporal anomaly. The Desert of Lost Days. The Anza Borrego Desert in Southern California is a landscape of brutal, beautiful indifference. It swallows sound, water, and sometimes people. But for the small online community of temporal wanderers, it's famous for swallowing something else: time. This is the phenomenon that afflicted Marcus Thorne, a hiker who was looking for nothing more than a challenging overnight trek and found himself facing a chronological collapse. Marcus was an experienced desert traveler, meticulous with his gear and planning.
He set off at sunrise, aiming for a prominent, oddly shaped rock formation known locally as the Sentinel. His plan was simple: hike all day, make camp at the base of the Sentinel by sunset, and return the following morning. He carried a GPS, a satellite phone, and a high-end solar-charged digital camera, all tools designed to keep his place in the world firmly anchored. The first sign of the anomaly was the sun. At 3 p.m., according to his watch, the sun seemed to hover. Not just a trick of the dry, clear air. It was frozen, a burning white coin nailed to the exact same position in the sky. He checked his watch. Working. His phone. Working, but with no signal. He looked at the Sentinel, which appeared to be exactly as far away as it had been an hour ago. He started walking faster, pushing himself harder, his shadow perfectly still and unchanging beneath his feet. He walked for what felt like 4 more hours, draining 2 liters of water, his internal clock screaming that it should be sunset. When he checked his watch again, it still read 3 p.m. He tapped it, shook it. It was counting seconds, minutes, and hours internally, but the displayed time had locked. He looked at the sun, and the horror was confirmed. The light quality, the shadows, the angle of the harsh desert light, it was all identical to 4 hours earlier. He was moving, but the day wasn't. Panic set in. He was caught in a localized temporal loop. He started running toward the Sentinel, not caring about conserving water, driven by the desperate need to break the cycle. He ran until he collapsed from exhaustion. When he recovered and checked his watch, the display had changed. It now read error, time out of bounds, and the entire device had shut down. The sun still burned, unmoving at 3 p.m. He tried the camera, taking a picture of the sky, hoping the timestamp would confirm his fear. The camera's screen flashed a terrifying message. Date 1970-01-01. Time 000-000. A generic default time, the moment of a digital system's inception. He was no longer just stuck. His existence was failing to register on any temporal metric. He was effectively out of time. For what he estimated was days, he wandered, the static 3 p.m. sun scorching his neck. The strange lack of shadow movement made the world feel flat, two-dimensional, like a painted backdrop. He found old, dried-out campsites, and in one, a diary. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before his arrival. It described the exact same phenomenon: the unmoving sun, the 3 p.m. lock. The final sentence was a terrifying realization. I keep drinking water, but I'm never less thirsty. It's not just the clock that's stuck. My body, it's not processing the new water. I think I'm running on a day-old copy of myself. He tossed the diary and stumbled onward, eventually finding a strange circular pattern of burned, crystallized sand, a geological anomaly that looked utterly alien. As he stepped over it, the world snapped. The sun moved. His shadow stretched long and thin, and the light shifted into orange-red hues of a sudden, blistering sunset. He looked at his wrist, and his watch had rebooted, displaying a correct time, but the date was 3 days later than when he'd set out. 3 days of existence, a full 72 hours, had been compressed into a moment, leaving him with a memory of endless, unmoving afternoon. The desert hadn't just swallowed his time, it had stolen 3 days of his life.
He barely made it back to his car, completely dehydrated and mentally shattered. The only thing he brought back was a faint metallic taste on his tongue, and the chilling knowledge that somewhere in the Anza Borrego, a pocket of reality exists where 3 p.m. lasts forever, and anyone who enters is simply running on borrowed, outdated energy until the Earth's rotation finally forces them to catch up. 3 days later.
This strange phenomenon was submitted to Watchman Tales by a man who refuses to go back to the desert, fearing the 3 lost days may eventually catch up with the rest of his life.